You're listening to the Mind Flipping Podcast, where you'll find tools and tips to help you renovate and update your mind and life.
Sheila, welcome to the Mind Flipping Podcast.
Hello, Rick. Great to see you.
Yeah, so excited to have you. I'm excited to get our listeners to find out a little bit about you. And as they heard from the intro a short while ago, you've done some incredible things. I am a virtual gastric band practitioner, and that's what most people know you for. But you've been flipping minds, including your own, for years. And so, where would you like to? I guess I would like to start there. Can you maybe share with our listeners a little bit about your personal mind flipping story or stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of hypnotists, Rick, we sort of fall upon this profession, and then we start to really get involved with that. But I think any of us can really change our lives and just not realise that there's a bigger world out there, because we sort of get stuck in our own routine of, this is my job, I go to work at this time, I come home at this time, and my, as I was saying, a previous life, but it wasn't really, it was in this lifetime. I worked for 20 years for the government as a fraud investigator. So I investigated people who weren't quite as disabled as they claimed to be. And it was my job to get the government's money back. And I did that for 20 years and, really saw nothing else. It would have been a job for life. It would have been that job for life. I then went sort of through a divorce. There was only myself and my daughter at home, and I'd always had an interest in how people think. I'd always had that interest. I'd actually started a psychology degree when my daughter was very young, but then I'm one of those people who, if I can't do it to the best of my ability, then I get bored with it and I don't want to do it. So although I was getting through the grades with this psychology degree, I knew I could actually do better than get through the grades, but I just hadn't got time because I have young children and you're limited with time. So I'd always had this interest in how people think. And then I saw a hypnotherapy training course. And I thought, well, that might be quite interesting. I might do that. And I really never intended to do anything with it at all. I was getting a divorce and I thought, well, I might see a couple of people a week maybe. And then, fast forward that 10 years, and I now find myself almost sitting on an international business and training people all over the world, and I published a book. And well, if somebody had said to me while I was sitting at my desk as a fraud investigator, is that possible to change your life to that degree? I would have thought, no, that person's talking rubbish. That's not possible. That couldn't happen to me.
That's so cool. So you saw an ad for training?
Yeah, I think it was actually before Facebook really took off with advertising and things. And I think it was a poster or something that I saw somewhere, or a leaflet. It might be an advert in the paper. And I just thought, hypnotherapy. At the time, the only experience I'd had of hypnosis was probably going back. My daughter was about 2 at the time, and she's now 29. And myself and my husband and a group of friends, we were going out on the Saturday night, and somebody said, there's a hypnotist on at this local bar. And I thought, a hypnotist? What is a hypnotist? And we were all a bit sort of, what is a hypnotist? We don't know what a hypnotist does. Well, we'll go and see what a hypnotist does. And at the time, I wasn't a particularly confident person. I wouldn't have been somebody who would get up on a stage. But the hypnotist did some suggestibility tests, as I now know that they are those, which I didn't know at the time. And I couldn't unstick my hands. He was gluing hands together, and my hands did stick together. And so we had to get up on this stage. I was peddling to save E.T. Mm-hmm. I was crying because then E.T. did die. And I was a washing machine on fast spin. I wouldn't like to give that demonstration again to what a washing machine on fast spin actually looks like. And and I say I wouldn't have been a person who would get up on stage at all. And in the end, I actually came out of it because I wouldn't have been that person. And I went and sat back down in the audience, and my husband at the time had said, unless you had been up on that stage, I would have thought the whole of tonight's show had been a setup. I wouldn't have believed it.
Sure.
And that was up until going on this hypnotherapy training course. That had been my only experience of what hypnosis was actually about.
So what was the time difference? How many years between?
Well, it must have been 15 years later.
So it was maybe like just floating in your mind that what happened?
Yeah, what happened? What happened there?
And then you saw the ad and took the training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't say that I've never looked back, because even when I took the training, you know, I wish I could say, you know, I was the perfect student. I did lots of practicing. I did this. I really didn't. I was probably a worst student ever who didn't practice anything, and, you know, came along for a jolly every weekend, you know. And it was only after the training had actually finished when I started, you know, sort of seeing a few people that I really noticed, wow, this shit really works. This shit works. And the people who know me really well, you know, one of my sometimes favourite phrases, you know, because people, as a hypnotist, sometimes people come to you and say, oh, well, if you're so good at whatever, why don't you fix yourself on this? But as we know, you know, people have got to want to make a change on something, and just because you're wearing that label that you're a hypnotist or you're a therapist doesn't make you a perfect human being, you know, in every shape and form. And so if anybody says to me, you know, well, you know, why don't you hypnotise yourself to sort that out? Or why don't you get, you know, hypnosis can make that happen for you? And my favourite phrase is, oh, I don't believe in that shit. You know?
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. But, you know, the reality is, you know, once I started working with people with this modality, it was just a massive wow factor to me. And when you have somebody who then says to you, you know, you've changed my life, there is no better feeling in the world. And it just drives you to want to do more and more of it, and, you know, to sort of explore the boundaries of it as well. Yeah. You know, I'm very much an evidence-based person. I like to see evidence for something, not just this one person has said to me, yeah, that's really helped me. And I also like to take it into as many areas as possible, because I normally take the word hypnosis away from everything to a certain extent. I don't shy away from that's what I do. But, you know, I think if we just take that term away and think of it in terms of how people think.
That's simple.
Then that means that we can help in, you know, so many different areas. You know, be that with sports, business, you know, one-on-one problems, you know, but we can all change our mindset to something. And, you know, one thing with my hypnosis training that always stuck in my mind is that one of those presuppositions of human behaviour, that the mind map is not a territory. You know, so we've all got this unique mind map of how we view the world. And like when I had my day job, as I call it, you know, as a fraud investigator, and that was my world. You know, my workmates, how they viewed the world, they were my influence. And all of a sudden now I'm in a completely different world, if you like, that I wouldn't ever have anticipated being in. I wouldn't have even thought that was possible.
So for newer listeners, or maybe even longtime listeners that are just wrapping their head, a light bulb went on, the whole, our map is not our territory. What's the expression?
Yeah, so that it's, you know, when I first heard the expression, you know, the mind map is not a territory.
Not a territory, yeah.
Not a territory. So people might think, you know, what on earth does that mean? The mind map is not a territory. But it really means that we all have this unique view of the world. And just because that's our view of the world doesn't mean it actually is the world. It's just how we're viewing it at that time. So, you know, going back, you know, years ago, everybody thought the world was flat. And nobody would be convinced otherwise, because no, the world is definitely flat. Now, I know there are some conspiracy theories even today that the world is still flat, but putting those aside, when they discovered the world was round. And so everybody then updated their mind map to what was possible, and actually now the world is round. So we've all got that, how we're viewing the world. And one thing I think with hypnotherapy, and certainly what it's done for me as a person, is it's made me a lot more tolerant of people and their views of the world. Whereas at one point, I might have been irritated if somebody had a different view to me, because I'm absolutely right. But now I can kind of sit back and think, well, that is just that person's view of the world. And the other supposition is that, we all make the best choices available to us at that time, given all our circumstances, as well as, being a fraud investigator. I was also what they call a magistrate on my local bench, as they call it in the UK. So I was a judge, basically. So I was the lay judge who didn't need legal qualifications, but they put lay magistrates in place to take on the views of the local community. And so, people used to appear in court, having done whatever they'd done. And, the courts heard from, parking offences right up to, murder charges. And, for some of the people that were in court, you sort of thought, well, there, but for the grace of God go I. I've totted up, speeding points. I've just been lucky I've not been banned, So we've all done stuff. But people who have committed the more serious crime, at that time when they did that, in their mind, that was the best choice available to them for their own benefit, not because we all make decisions based on our own benefits, actually not on others. So, whatever issue we've all got, or however we've behaved or acted, we've got a little bit of we can salve our conscience a little bit that actually that was the best choice available to that person at that time. So I think when you understand more about how our minds work and you get more into this, you do get a lot of light bulb moments about that, well, actually it's just somebody's view of the world. They made the best choice available to them at that time. Doesn't mean we have to carry on running the same programme, but, it doesn't make us a bad person because, well, maybe it would if you murdered somebody, but murders aside, we're sort of making the best choice for us at any moment in time. Be that I'm going to have that another bar of chocolate, even though I want to be on a diet and I want to be slimmer, or, to further extremes in our life.
Yeah. That's a great point. I've never actually heard somebody say that, but in reflection, it's true. Like in my life, I've always considered myself open and tolerant, but I'm definitely more so, because we have the awareness that they're just operating from their own map, the best choice. And while it wouldn't be our choice, they wouldn't be choosing it if it wasn't, their optimal choice. Even if it's not a conscious choice, it could be their subconscious is finding that this is the best action.
Yeah. And thinking that, all action has positive intent.
Right.
So, we don't actually set out to do necessarily things for bad. When, for example, 9/11 happened, for the people who did those atrocities in their own minds, that was done with positive intent for them.
Right.
Because I don't know, they were going to go on, I don't know, is it gone... sleep with a million virgins, or whatever they were going to be going to a higher place with their belief system and their mind map of the world. That was the positive intent for them. So the fallout for other people isn't great sometimes, but sometimes if we can understand what our own positive intent is, why are we doing, what am I getting out of this, what is the benefit to me to behave in this way? And then can we replace that with something that we get the same outcome, but it's still more positive for other people around us as well?
I love it. so true. Well, on that note, I would love to thank you for sharing your personal mind flipping story, how your map was fraud investigator and then it exploded after the training, and you've traveled the world. Before we clicked record, you said you've got 8 events, in a number of countries in the next 4 weeks. So your world is definitely different.
Yes.
Very different. And you were saying also before we clicked record that you had a professional mind flipping story early on in your hypnotherapy career about hiccups. Did you say?
Yeah. So when I first qualified as a hypnotherapist, I'd only been qualified for, I think, about a week.
Wow.
And my local newspaper had a plea for help. And it was a lady, she'd hiccuped for 5.5 years continuously. I mean, that must be shocking, mustn't it? Just like,
Wow.
5.5 years of it.
Like every couple of seconds?
Yeah.
No breaks?
Just a continuous stream of it.
Wow.
And she'd been everywhere, it said in this article. She'd seen hospital consultants, she'd done everything she could possibly think of. So I'd been qualified for a week, and I thought, I wonder if I could do anything with that lady. I wonder if I could help her. So I put my big girl's pants on, and I rang up the newspaper and said, I'm a hypnotherapist, and I think I might be able to help that lady. I'd like to offer her a free consultation, free session, and just to see if I can help her. And if she'd like to take me up on that, just give her my contact details and ask her to give me a ring. The next day, the newspaper rang me back and they said, we'd like to bring that lady to see you, and we'd like to film the session for our website as well. I thought, oh, no pressure there then. And I looked everywhere in the hypnotherapy training manual to where it was going to tell me how I worked with hiccups, and there really wasn't anything at all. And this lady came anyway, and I'm doing my hypnotic induction, counting from 1 to 10. At this point, I get to 9, and there is no angel in the room that appears to tell me what to say. I thought, just go with what your gut instinct is, and go with this lady's mind map of the world. What is it that's already in her mind map? Now, she was a really quiet lady, and all I got out of her really was she was getting a divorce, and she worked actually at a bingo hall, and she was a cleaner at a bingo hall. So I thought, so she understands cleaning, and she's getting a divorce. That's all I've got to work with.
Wow.
So I said, in hypnosis, I just said to her, I want you to imagine what the inside of your throat and all this area looks like. What does it actually look like? When you get an image of it in your mind, let me know. I said, because maybe it's a bit mucky. Maybe it needs a bit of a clean. So I'm just going to go quiet while you clean it all up. And I want you have it looking just how you want it to look. All the nooks and crannies, you make sure it's all sparkling and, how it should be. And when you've done that, nod your head. I said, I want you to, I got her to imagine she was in a really messy room. There was 3 boxes, one for the past, one for the now, one for the future. And I want you to clean up all that room, put everything away in the boxes where it needs to be. And she stopped hiccuping. And she hasn't hiccuped since.
Wow.
And, when you're sitting there listening, thinking, have you stopped though? Have you stopped it? Is there going to be another one? And she hasn't hiccuped since. And it was a really sweet story as well, because the following weekend she sent me a poem that she'd written about how I'd stopped her hiccuping. And she sent me an annual pass for the bingo.
That's awesome.
And she got me a £1 lottery ticket for that weekend's lottery, which I thought was really sweet, really sweet. But it just goes to show that, sometimes I think, we don't need to overcomplicate things. That was just let's just be really, really simple about this. and what is her understanding of the world? What is her mind map of the world? And I just jumped into that for a while, let her access her own resources to fix herself.
That's so cool. So did she have any insight? Did she share anything? Oh, I think this is what happened, or no? How about you? What did you learn from it? I think you talked
I
about.
learned there must be angels in the room.
Hmm.
I from that day, I am very much a forward-thinking therapist. I don't want to go digging around in the past unless I have to. If I can bring about a lasting change in somebody that without going backwards, then I will do. Because, whatever's happened in somebody's life has happened. We can't erase that. We can look at erasing the feelings and reframing and everything else. But often, and sometimes people do highlight things themselves. There was a guy who came to me, he was a lawyer, only a young lad in his early 20s, trainee lawyer, had a fear of blood. And he wanted to be fixed because he was going to be reading reports about stabbings and all sorts of things, and he didn't want to be fainting at his desk multiple times a day. But also he was going to have his wisdom teeth taken out of the hospital. And so I just started the induction, and he spontaneously requested at that point. And he was sitting at the foot of his grandma's bed in the hospital, and his grandma was dying. He said he was about 7 years old, and he hadn't got a problem with her dying. You think that was a thing that would upset him, but it really wasn't that. He said, but all I could see was that cannula in her hand with that, and there was a massive bruise around it, where the needles had gone in. And we really didn't do anything else, but it was enough for him to become consciously aware of where it had come from, and that actually he was just viewing that as the child in him viewing that he didn't need to think like that anymore. That was his light bulb moment. Bingo. And once we have those light bulb moments, consciously we can work out the problem ourselves, can't we?
It can happen, yep. Blink of an eye, snap of a finger, flip of a switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's often how people, sort of do describe a lot of the stuff, that it's like a switch has been flicked.
Yep.
Sometimes things happen in our lives. You'll hear of somebody who suddenly decides one day that that's it, they're going to stop smoking. And they've done it themselves, and they've maybe been smoking for, 30 years, but one day, that's it. Like a light bulb. Whereas other people, the light bulb's not there, so they would struggle with that and keep trying and trying and trying, So we all have those light bulb moments, don't we?
Yeah. Yep. And often it's just about creating space for them, creating the intention.
Yes.
Making room for the angels to come into the room.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Aha, my choir of angels are here.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we are squeezing this in. You've got a busy schedule. And I also know, speaking of creating space for change, that you wanted to offer something for our listeners. Am I correct? Yeah.
So I've got a relaxation recording that just allows people to, I always describe stress as a bit like the rev counter on your car. If the car goes into the red in the rev counter, the engine's in trouble. And a lot of the time in our lives, we are hovering just below the red. Because we've all got such busy lives and, so many things to think about, so many things to do. And so quite often we can just be hovering, and it doesn't then take us much to put us in stress overload. So if we take that time, every day, just to take a little bit of that stress away, a bit of downtime, because even when we're watching the television or we're sitting with our feet up, our head's still on the go. Our head is still working through, I haven't done that person up, I've not done this, not done that. How often in our life do we actually just take a step back? So by listening to something like a hypnosis recording, you're allowing yourself to bring the dial down on that rev counter of, stress. And when we take that step back, that's when we allow ourselves to become more creative, and see new opportunities and things that we can change. A bit like, if you go on a holiday or vacation, you tend to find the first couple of days, you sort of, you wind down a little bit. And then maybe in about day 3 or 4, when you've really kind of switched off from everyday living, I start to become really creative then. I think, when I get back home, I think I am going to go to a yoga class 3 times a week, or Pilates, or whatever it may be.
Right.
You have all great ideas. And we tend to not carry those through because we get back in our normal day-to-day life and we kind of forget because we get back into the hamster wheel of life. But if we allow that creativity time, we're much more likely to be following through on those things, and also just seeing other opportunities, seeing that, expanding our mind map of the world
In a whole new way.
So I'm very happy to, offer listeners that recording, that just allows that bit of a switch off for them every day.
So powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So listeners can go to the Mind Flipping website, mindflipping.com. Check the show notes on your player, and we'll put a link for that download, for that awesome little break. Well, fantastic. And if people want to get hold of you, Sheila, what's the best way to get hold of you?
So probably my email is think, THINK, at SheilaGranger.com.
Awesome. Sheila, thanks for sharing your personal, your professional mind flipping stories, giving us hope in so many different ways, not only in this conversation, but all that you're doing in your trainings and your work throughout the world. We all, and I especially, love you and appreciate you.
Thank you, Rick. And it's been great to be on this show today.
Awesome.